I'm Sue Hausmann.
And I'm Jan Walters.
And we're here to talk about Quilt As You Go. You know, Jan, one of the things today, many of the folks that are going to have the new 5D QuiltDesign Creator are going to want to be able to do this with hoops because they don't have a frame. Now, obviously the quilter that has a quilting frame and a long arm machine would stretch their whole quilt out on the frame and then would quilt it as one big piece.
Yeah.
But many folks are going to have smaller hoop sizes, and maybe they don't have a frame yet, like me. I don't have one yet, but you guys are convincing me that I need one, and I bet you're getting the idea that you could use a frame as well. But what we're going to show right now is that you would now create your designs to hoop and to create and quilt as you go. So as you see below, I've quilted these individual blocks one at a time.
Yeah.
Now you said your grandma didn't do it this way.
No, she didn't. She pieced all the individual pieces, the quilt blocks, stitched those together, inserted her batting, and then added the backing on it.
And that is definitely the more traditional way to quilt,
Yeah.
to create your top. But we're seeing so much today, new techniques, new technology, that we can actually create the special quilting design we want for each of these blocks in the new 5D QuiltDesign Creator. Let me show you how easy it is.
Great.
Because simply choose a new page, and now we go to start a quilt block. I'm going to pick that one, start a new quilt block, which is one of the great new features. And oops, I've got a half square triangle here. Well, these are square blocks. So
Yeah.
I would bring up the square and then enter the size. So you measure the block you want to do. I'm hovering over it there so you can see it in millimeters as well.
Yeah.
And that's important when you're working with hoops, because most hoops are sized in millimeters. So I've created the square, and I say next, and what we want is an outline quilt block. So you will choose the outline quilt block, no internal shape, and there it is. Your block is ready to have the quilting design put on it. In fact, for those of you that really want to see it visually, you could take a picture of your block and put it in there and design on top of it. So let's pick a design. It's so easy because you simply touch the camera and you see the pictures.
Right.
You can just choose the one you want. There I chose a really pretty feather design. Size it to the size you want, and off we go. Once it's the way you want it, simply, well, in this case, we would be exporting it as an embroidery design.
Right.
Okay.
So after you export it, what are your next steps when you get into the quilting?
All right, so I would export this to my machine on a USB stick. I'd simply put it on a stick. And many of you might have machines that you would be writing it directly to the machine. And then you simply quilt your blocks in the hoop. And then the next step would be to piece those together with your borders, okay, and your sashings. In other words, I would cut strips to sash this. Then you would lay out that quilt top. So see, we would have a quilt top with this nice puffed quilt design, and then sandwich the top, the batting, the backing, like your grandma used to do.
Right.
And many times at that point I would simply, on my sewing machine, stitch in the ditch around these blocks, which is much easier than hooping the whole big piece.
Seems like it.
Yeah, so very easy to do that. And one of the things below, you can see a design that is printed on a quilt. Same idea. I simply entered, or you would enter, the size of this rectangle and say I'd like to do it in diamond quilting. So there you see the diamond quilting, and I'm going to turn it over so you can really see how it is diamond quilted on the back. Let's get it into the shot. So that was easy to quilt this quilt with a hoop.
That looks very easy.
Now, how do you finish the quilt? And I just quickly want to show a couple of ways. The other thing I do want to remind all of our people is when you have created any of the quilt designs, you can print them out. Just touch print. Just click on it, and you see what's the design that you've created. You can see it as a picture and just see what it's going to look like. But better yet, you can create a full-size template. Now, many people say to me, well, my hoop is bigger than my 8.5 by 11 printer paper.
Right.
That's right. It prints it out on multiple sheets, and then you simply tape it together like this, and you have an actual size template.
And I'm a visual, so I love that.
I am too, and you know, sometimes you want to put it in a certain place on a large piece of fabric. So here is one of the designs, and the design splitter helped me with this one, that new program, to actually put these two pieces together for my large turnable hoop. And this one finished with the traditional binding. And most of our long arm quilters use a traditional binding.
Really?
Where they actually cut strips of fabric and put it on and go around the edge. But I'd like to suggest that many of them wouldn't have to do that hand step.
Yes.
If they would instead simply sew that traditional binding onto the back side of the quilt. This is the back side that I'm working on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance or whatever seam width their binding is. And there are many guide feet available for that. That's such a help to have a guide foot when you're sewing that in place. Sew it on all the way around, get those corners set, and then the finishing is brought to the front side. Now, one thing I would recommend is to go around the edge first with a 3-step zigzag. Track those edges really well.
Reinforce
Yeah.
it.
It makes it a little flatter and a little firmer to work on, and it also keeps the edges together as you're stitching your binding on. But you bring this to the front now, and that's where you would do the final stitching so that you can go perfectly straight, of course, from the front, and use one of the feet that actually stitches and has a groove on the underside to go into that binding and let it feed straight. And I like to use the little hand look stitch. This is one of the stitches that looks like a little hand buttonhole stitch.
Right.
But some people would be zigzagging that.
So you can, make your preference what you decide you want to use.
Right. Now, if you have watched our 5D card shop videos, you might remember that we brought the backing around to the front. This is actually one of my favorite ways to bind because it's quicker. And so that means that we simply cut our backing larger than the top, create those mitered corners, trim them excess off, bring it around to the front, and again, the same stitching.
That looks so easy.
Doesn't it? Yeah, see this, there's no separate binding. And long armors can do that as well because they just cut their backing larger than their batting and their top. And then the quickest way to put a quilt together, you might notice that this one was embroidered just through the batting, no backing. And so you're seeing the batting there, and here's the backing. Right sides together. I then, after I stitch it, leaving a hole to turn it right side out, trim it with a pinking shear, and then turn that quilt right side out. And you have we call this the envelope method of making the quilt and putting it together, and just pull it flat, get it straight, and you've got your quilt all finished that way. So very quick, very easy to make your quilts. What do you think, Jan?
Hey, we've come a long way since my grandmother started quilting.
We sure have. We hope you're going to watch all of those videos so that you can see all the quick tips and easy ways to quilt today.